The scent of lilies and old books clung to the air of the study. A scent that would forever be synonymous with loss in Eleanor's mind. It had been 3 months since Arthur's quiet heart had simply stopped, leaving a cavernous silence in the sprawling Victorian house they had shared for 40 years. On the mahogany desk, a single porcelain cup steamed with chamomile tea, a futile attempt to calm the tremor in her hands. She was holding the letter, the one that had arrived that morning with the crisp, impersonal logo of the law firm handling Arthur's estate. The final reading of the will was scheduled for next week, but today, she held a different document, a draft of her own last will and testament. For 50 years, her entire adult life, it had been a simple, loving document, everything to Arthur, and if he predeceased her, everything to their only child, Sarah. Then, upon her own passing, the estate would be divided equally between Sarah and her family. It was straightforward, a testament to a life built on love and trust, a life that now felt like a beautiful, elaborate lie. The memory, sharp and corrosive, pierced her grief. It was 2 weeks after the funeral. The black dresses had been put away, the casseroles from well-meaning neighbors had dwindled, and the stark reality of solitude had begun to set in. Sarah had come over, her face pinched with a concern that, at the time, Eleanor had mistaken for love. "Mother, we need to talk about the will reading," Sarah had said, perched on the edge of Arthur's favorite armchair as if afraid to get too comfortable. "It's all settled, darling," Eleanor had replied, her voice thin. "Your father was meticulous. The house, the investments, it all comes to me, and then to you." "Yes, but," Sarah had hesitated, twisting the large diamond on her finger a ring. "Arthur had helped her husband, David, choose. It's just, David's birthday is on the 19th. The law firm called. They've scheduled the reading for the 19th. Eleanor had blinked, confused. "So, we can go in the morning. It shouldn't take long, Mother. You don't understand." Sarah's voice had taken on a strained, impatient tone. "It's David's 40th. It's a huge milestone. I've been planning a surprise party for him for months. A weekend trip to the Vineyard Estate in Napa. Everything is booked. Non-refundable." The silence that followed was heavier than any that had filled the house since Arthur's death. Eleanor felt the words, but they refused to coalesce into meaning. You want to reschedule the reading of your father's will," Eleanor finally managed, "for a birthday party." "It's not just a party, Mother," Sarah had exclaimed, as if explaining something simple to a child. "It's a statement. David's partners will be there. It's important for his career. And the will, it's just a formality, isn't it? We know what's in it. A week later won't change anything. Daddy would understand. Daddy would understand." The words were a whisper, but they carried the force of a scream. "Sarah, your father is gone. This is the last legal act of his life. This is about him, about honoring him, and we will." Sarah's eyes had flashed with a defiance Eleanor had never seen before. "But life goes on, Mother. David and I, we have a life to build. I've already called the lawyers. I told them we have a family conflict and need to move it to the 26th. The cold finality of it had stolen the air from Eleanor's lungs. She had done it, without consulting her, without a shred of respect for her father's memory. Sarah had prioritized a birthday cake over her father's legacy. "Get out," Eleanor had whispered. "Mother, don't be dramatic. Get out of my house." The roar had come from a place of pain so deep it shocked them both. Sarah had left, slamming the door, her parting words hanging in the air. "You're being selfish. You always put him first." Now, weeks later, the anger had not subsided. It had crystallized into something cold, hard, and clear. The grief for Arthur was now intertwined with a profound sense of betrayal. The daughter she had raised, the little girl Arthur had adored, had shown her true colors. It was about the money. It had always been about the money, waiting in the wings. The love, the respect, it had all been a performance. Eleanor picked up her fountain pen, the heavy silver one Arthur had given her on their 30th anniversary. The draft of the will lay before her, a document of disinheritance. She would not leave Sarah with nothing. That would be cruel, and despite everything, Eleanor was not cruel. But she would not reward Everett. The house, Arthur's pride and joy, filled with a lifetime of memories, would not go to the woman who considered a vineyard party more important than his final wishes. The substantial investment portfolio, built with Arthur's shrewdness and her own frugality, would not fund a life of luxury for someone with such a shallow heart. Her pen began to move, scratching decisively across the paper. "Last will and testament of Eleanor Margaret Vance. She bequeathed the house, its contents, and the land to the local historical society, with the stipulation that it be maintained as a museum and writer's retreat, a living monument to the love of literature she and Arthur had shared. The bulk of the financial estate was divided. A large portion went to establish the Arthur Vance Memorial Scholarship for underprivileged students pursuing engineering, his field. Another portion went to the animal shelter where she volunteered, a place that had given her more comfort in the past months than her own daughter. And for Sarah, she would receive a single, lump sum amount. It was enough to be comfortable, to pay off a mortgage, but it was a fraction of what she had expected. It was not an inheritance. It was a settlement, a severance package for a relationship terminated by its own greed. Eleanor included a clause, a final, pointed twist of the knife. Sarah would receive her share only after she provided documented proof of having visited Arthur's grave on the anniversary of his death for 5 consecutive years. It was a test of basic decency, a requirement that cost nothing but a moment of time and a shred of respect. She signed her name with a flourish, feeling a grim sense of satisfaction. The revenge was not sweet. It was bitter and necessary, like a strong medicine. She called her lawyer, an old family friend who had known Arthur well, and instructed him to draw up the final document with urgency. The will reading on the 26th was a tense, quiet affair. Sarah sat beside David, her face a mask of strained patience. She barely listened as the lawyer read Arthur's will, her mind clearly on the party she had missed, the disappointment she had soothed in her husband. When it was confirmed that everything passed to Eleanor, she offered a tight, satisfied smile. The real prize, she believed, was yet to come. Eleanor said nothing. She simply watched her daughter, her heart a closed fist in her chest. The years that followed were a study in quiet estrangement. Sarah's visits became infrequent, always timed around holidays, or when she needed something help with a down payment, a loan that was never repaid. Eleanor remained cordial but distant, a fortress protecting the secret she held within the walls of the old house. She watched Sarah and David's life from a distance, their expensive vacations, their new cars, their constant social climbing. It all seemed so hollow. Eleanor poured her energy into the scholarship fund, corresponding with the bright, grateful students who received it. She found solace in the shelter, in the unconditional love of the abandoned animals. She lived a full life, but a part of her remained frozen in the study on the day she had signed the will. When the cancer came, it was swift and merciless. Eleanor faced it with the same quiet dignity with which she had faced her widowhood. Sarah, alerted by the doctors, appeared at her bedside. Her concern seemed genuine, laced with a new, anxious energy. The vulture was circling, waiting for the end. Eleanor died peacefully in her sleep, in the bed she had shared with Arthur for 4 decades. The house was silent, holding its breath. The reading of Eleanor's will was held in the same law office, with the same lawyer, now older and grayer. Sarah and David arrived, dressed in somber, expensive black. Sarah's eyes were red-rimmed, but they glittered with anticipation. This was it, the culmination of a lifetime of expectation. The lawyer began to read the formalities, the small bequests to friends and the shelter. Sarah shifted impatiently. Then came the core of the estate. I bequeath my primary residence, known as Hawthorne House, and all its land and contents, to the Oak Ridge Historical Society. Sarah's head snapped up. What? That's a mistake. The lawyer continued, his voice steady. To be maintained in perpetuity as the Vance Memorial Retreat for writers and historians. No, Sarah whispered, her face draining of color. No, that's our house. David placed a restraining hand on her arm, his own face tight. The lawyer read on, detailing the scholarship fund, the generous donation to the shelter. With each word, Sarah seemed to shrink in her chair. The empire she had taken for granted was vanishing before her eyes. Finally, he came to her portion. To my daughter, Sarah Elizabeth Miller, I bequeath the sum of $250,000, to be dispersed in a single payment. A choked sound escaped Sarah's lips. It was a pittance, an insult, upon the condition that she provides to the executor of this estate documented proof, such as a dated photograph, of having visited the gravesite of her father, Arthur James Vance, on the anniversary of his death, for a period of 5 consecutive years following the date of this will's signing. The silence in the room was absolute. The lawyer laid down the document and looked at Sarah, his expression unreadable. Sarah stared, uncomprehending for a moment, and then the understanding dawned. brutal and complete. The birthday party, the rescheduling, the argument. Her mother had known, her mother had planned this, had sat in her grief and her anger, and had crafted this exquisite, devastating punishment. The money wasn't the point was the message, carved into legal jargon for all eternity. You chose a party over your father. You showed me who you are, and this is the consequence. She can't do this, Sarah shrieked, leaping to her feet. She was not of sound mind. The grief made her crazy. I'll contest this. I'll fight it. The lawyer sighed softly. Mrs. Miller, I assure you, your mother was of perfectly sound mind. She provided multiple medical assessments to that effect. The will is ironclad, and as for the condition, he opened a file. According to our records, you have not visited your father's grave on the specified date in the last 5 years. Therefore, the condition has not been met. Sarah froze. He was right. She had been too busy. There was always a conflict, a gala, a trip, one of David's business dinners. She had sent flowers sometimes, but she had never gone. It was just a stone in the ground, she had told herself. He wasn't really there now. That stone had become the barrier to her birthright. The fight that followed was ugly and public. Sarah contested the will, claiming undue influence from the Historical Society and the animal shelter. The local newspaper, which had once published a glowing obituary for Arthur, now ran salacious stories about the family feud. Old friends took sides. The community whispered about the daughter who valued money over memory. In the end, the will stood. The Historical Society took possession of Hawthorne House, and Eleanor's spirit seemed to settle peacefully within its walls as it filled with the quiet energy of writers and scholars. The scholarship fund sent dozens of students to college in Arthur's name. Sarah received nothing. The legal battle had drained what little savings she and David had, built on the expectation of a future windfall. The lavish lifestyle, built on a foundation of anticipation, crumbled. David's partners, embarrassed by the scandal, quietly edged him out. The marriage, strained by financial pressure and mutual recrimination, eventually collapsed. Years later, on a bleak autumn day, a woman in a cheap coat stood before 2 headstones in the cemetery. One read Arthur James Vance, beloved husband and father. The other, Eleanor Margaret Vance, a life of love and principle. Sarah Miller laid a single, wilted flower on each grave. There were no tears left, only a hollow, aching understanding. Her mother's revenge had not been to leave her poor, but to leave her with the undeniable truth of her own choices. She had chosen a birthday, and in doing so, she had lost everything else. The inheritance wasn't the money or the house, it was the lesson, cold, hard, and eternal, etched not in a will, but on her soul. The party was long over, and the silence that remained was her own. Did you enjoy the story? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Tell me which city you're watching from in the comments. If the story touched your heart, you can support me with a super thanks. It helps me keep creating and sharing more meaningful stories with you. Your love and support mean the world to me, and I can't wait to read your beautiful comments on the screen. You'll find 2 more inspiring life stories that I highly recommend. Don't miss them. There's so much more waiting for you on my channel. So hit subscribe and join our growing family. Until the next life story, sending you love, respect, and endless gratitude.